talked about last week, which is basically the history of humanity as it is unfolding before our very eyes. So I want to start with the principle you have to understand. Every situation in the world has the potential to use for good or for bad. Okay? God puts us into a situation. He created a system, as it says in Ecclesiastes and Koheles, that there is a parallel reality where God sets up the world that you could choose good or choose evil. And it lies in the balance. Evil will look good, so it can be enticing. And there has to be the option of a person to choose. So we are now in the month called Cheshvan, which was the month when the flood happened. Okay, now the flood, although we all look at it as a very negative thing, which it was obviously, but the Torah is also compared to water. Okay, as it says in the verse, whoever is thirsty, go to the Chula Mayim, go to the water, go to drink Torah. So Torah is compared to water, that water makes everything grow. And we have a teaching that the flood, the generation of the flood, could have actually been a very righteous generation. And they could have had a lot of blessings. They could have received the Torah even. And as a matter of fact, when the rain first came down, it says the rain that God first brought in the flood was a rain of blessing, that it was a sign to the people, wake up, and if you do, it won't be a flood, it'll become rains of blessing. Okay, so we're in a situation where there's the option to go either way. And right now, the world is in a very, very precarious place. And as I've been saying to you, people are choosing, I don't know. It's like, I look as a Jew in Israel, I look at what's happening in America, in London. I says it's, it sounds like it's worse there for a Jew. And here in Israel, everyone knows who the good guys and the bad guys are. And it seems in outside in the world, people are a little bit confused who's who and what's what. So right now, we have to understand that how things play out right now, there's a potential that can go to the positive, and eventually everything will be for the positive for those who choose that way. But we're in that situation right now. This is that month of Cheshvan. Now, the month of Cheshvan, which is the month that we're in, and we're about to move into a new month this Tuesday. So the month of Cheshvan. So the sages say that most of the troubles of the Jews happened during this month. The month of Cheshvan is a tough month of decrees against Jews. And like I got to tell you, just so you understand, like, the thing that happened was a very terrible tragedy of the 1,400 people that were killed, brutal, terrible, terrible, terrible tragedy. And we have to understand that. You have to understand, though, that, people saying things like, oh, this is, Israel's moment of understanding. These things have been going on for thousands of years. You just got to realize that. And I don't know if people realize that. Like, you can go to Ukraine today and see a statue of this hero of Ukraine called Khmelnytsky, who killed maybe 100,000 Jews, more. He was a Cossack. Pogroms. So this has been a dynamic that the Jews have dealt with in the world, and we understand it. Those who read the Torah understand that God says that the history of the Jews will be a supernatural history. I forgot who it was. It was, I think it was Dostoevsky. It was somebody who was not a Jew lover, who the king asked him, how do you see God, the God in the world? Look at Jewish history. There's no way these people should be surviving. There's no way. And that's why our history does not go naturally. The Jews are either up or they're very pushed down and hated. And that's the persecution, which is discussed in the book of Devarim, in the book of Deuteronomy in great detail. So the month of Cheshvan, this month that we're leaving now, has been a time where there has been a lot of problems for the Jews. And the sages say, well, the reason for that was the month that the kingdom of King David split. Because if you look at Jewish history, there was the split that King David was, the first king was Saul, then King Shaul, then was King David, then King Shlomo. King Shlomo was really supposed to be the Mashiach. He could have been the Mashiach if he merited. And but when King Shlomo, Solomon's son, Rehoboam became the king, the country split. And it divided into the kingdom into 10 tribes and the 2 tribes. In the south was called Judea, and the northern kingdom was the 10 tribes. And that split happened in this month of Cheshvan. So when the Jews are not united, that's not a good situation. I was surprised. I mentioned this to you before, but I just heard it wasn't a political commentator. Her name is Aya Hirsi. Have you ever heard of her? She's a Muslim woman who escaped some torturous situations she was in. I got in whatever country she was in, and she's been a vocal opponent to radical to violent Islamic ideas, and she said a very interesting thing. She didn't say it from a Jewish perspective, said it from her perspective, as a commentator. She said, the Jews can't afford to have internal conflict because they have internal conflict. They can't put their eye on their enemy that surrounds them. So what was happening the past few months before this terrible massacre happened, the Jews started arguing about this whole thing with the Supreme Court. And it was really, there were some people getting nervous because Israel is becoming a religious country. And that's changing. So I got nervous about that, trying to put the Supreme Court, give them power, that they could make their own ideas, whatever it is. So she says that this internal divide, they weren't watching the enemy. And that Israel can't afford that. It's a very interesting and astute observation. It's true on a political level. On a spiritual level, it's something much deeper. On a spiritual level, when the Jews are united, then everything is good. And we all know that. A person has kids, he loves to see his kids getting along. When the kids are fighting, the parent's not happy. So when the Jewish people have unity, that brings the redemption. And the good news is right now is the people are very, very united. So that is the month of Cheshvan that we are exiting now. Okay, the month of Cheshvan, we're finishing it. It was a month that is precarious. There was a divide amongst the Jewish people. There are sometimes problems because of that. And God willing, it causes the Jews to reunite. It was a time of the flood when the world did not learn its lesson and persisted in its negative way of responding when God was giving them the opportunity to go and to see correctly. Now, from Cheshvan now, we're moving into a new month called Kislev. Okay, Kislev is coming up this week. Now, I want to talk about the month of Kislev a little bit, because the month of Kislev is the month where the miracle of Hanukkah happens. Okay, and just to get the basic storyline, so the story of Hanukkah is what happened was the Greek philosophy spread out throughout the world, and the world welcomed it. It was a very different conquering than other nations because people were very backwards, and came along the Greeks, who were these philosophers and had these interesting ideas, and people embraced their beliefs. And Hellenistic thinking, Greek thinking spread out throughout the world. So when Alexander the Great conquered the world, and he went and he conquered, he spread out. So he did fight wars, but the people then were quite happy to take on Greek belief, which was what their function was. They wanted people to become Greek-minded. Now, there was only one nation that was not happy to become Hellenistic, Greek, philosophical type of people. And can you guess who those people were? Those were the Jews. They were not interested in that. Now, I can't say all Jews, because that's the same thing you see today. You see me talking about, what Judaism is, and then you'll see guys like, I don't know, Mark Zuckerberg. What planet is he from? I don't know. He's not from a Jewish planet. I don't know. Like he's got his ideas, but they have nothing to do with anything that bears any resemblance to what we've been doing for thousands of years. And so that existed always, where there were some people that were on the fringe, and those people did want to bring in the Greek ideas, and they said, "Hey, these ideas are pretty interesting." Now, as opposed to what you may have heard, that Hanukkah is the holiday of tolerance, which is some kind of I don't know where that one came from. It's actually the holiday of sort of intolerance, really. What happened was the rabbis stood up, and the Kohanim, the priests, the ones who did the service in the temple, the descendants of Aaron, stood up, and they were supposed to slaughter a pig because that was the Greeks who were forcing them, and they went and they killed the Greeks, and they started a war. Now, this war was seemingly not a very good idea. Why? Because basically it was a rabbi and his sons and a ragtag bunch of untrained rabbis fighting against the superpower of the world. So really, it kind of didn't make too much sense to do this. However, they said, we are standing up for what is true, standing for the Torah, and we're not going to accept the Greek ways. The Greeks were forcing the Jews to do Greek things, making decrees against them, all their terrible decrees, which was part of their system. Like they had one decree, which was I forgot what it's called in Latin. It's a very famous thing. They used to force women the night of their marriage to go into sleep with the governor of the town. So I feel it's called prima facie. I think it was called, but it was a very common thing that was done in the ancient world. And there was a story of the daughter of this rabbi, a Yehudit, who she gave him to the governor to go and gave him milk and cheese, and she got him drowsy, and then she cut his head off. That's a Jewish Wonder Woman, right? She ran out with his head, chopped his head off. And that did not, the Greeks did not take too good to that. They didn't like that too much. And the rebellion started. So that's why we have a custom of we eat milk products, dairy products on Hanukkah to remember what she did and how she really started the revolution there, and she freed all the girls, and that was part of the process. So there's a war that happened, and the war didn't make any sense, because the chances of winning this in any logical way were zero. I mean, think about it. It's nuts. It's like basically imagine somebody, imagine like, I don't know, a few hundred people without any weapons starting to fight the superpower of the world today. It's ridiculous. Not possible. So, but they did it. And Hashem made miracles for them, and they won. And the Greeks who had put idols in the temple, they removed the idols, and they re-sanctified the temple. That's the basic story of Hanukkah. So the Greeks try to force us to accept their beliefs and break the Torah, and we stood up and said no. We stood up against the Jews that were for it and said, no, this is not, you can't do this. And the rabbis did not, said this is we're not taking their stuff. And when they re-sanctified the temple, which the Greeks had made impure and put idols in, and what happened was we lit the menorah. And the menorah, so what happened was that there was a special seal that the Kohen Gadol, the high priest of Israel, had on all of the oil to light the candelabra. And that was a service in the temple. There was a 7-branch candelabra, which we lit, and that was representing God's giving his light out into the world. And they wanted to light it from the proper holy oil, that people didn't touch it in a state of impurity. And the Greeks had made them all impure, and they found one little vial of oil which had still had the seal that was still pure, and they used it to light, and it was enough for one night, and it went for 8 nights. And that gave them enough time to go and to make the oil, because it was a very special way they made the oil. It was going from the first drop of the olive. It's a very special process described in the Torah of how to make this special oil, this pure oil. So it took them a while to make it and to get it. But the miracle was that the candles lit for 8 days, and that is the custom today that we do. We celebrate the miracle of the war, and we also celebrate as the main function is the lighting of the candelabra, of the menorahs that we have. The one in the temple was 7 branches. Ours we do is 8 branches, because it's not the same thing, even though it's a remembrance of the temple's candelabra, but it's 8 because it was 8 days that it lasted, and the miracle was there for 8 days, and we celebrate the 8 days of Hanukkah. Okay, great. Now, that's the basic storyline. Now, what does the word Hanukkah mean? So this is every Jewish child will tell you. Learned this in school. The word Chanukah has a few different meanings. One meaning is the word Chanu is to come to rest, to encamp, and the kaf hey is the number 25, because every letter in Hebrew has a number. So it's called Chanukah because the 25th of the month they rested. That is when they beat the Greeks. And that's when they started to light the candles, which lasted for 8 days. So the holiday of Hanukkah is on the 25th of the month of Kislev, the month we're coming into right now. That's the simple explanation. There's another explanation. The word Hanukkah is to inaugurate. Like when we say in Hebrew, a child is educated, he's brought in, he's trained in the very beginning of his life. So it's called, he has a chinuch. A chinuch is an education, inauguration, how to act. So it's also called Chanukah because it was the re-inauguration of the temple, which the Greeks had taken over, and it made it impure and made the Jews not allowed to do the service in the temple. Now, that's the basics. I want to tell you something that is very, very deep. It's another reason why it's called Hanukkah, a not well-known reason that I'm sure even some of my other students are here have not heard this, because it's not a well-known reason, but it's very relevant to our situation in the world today. Another reason why it's called Hanukkah, the inauguration, is because one of the commentaries say because it inaugurated the world. What does it mean, inaugurated the world? What happened was that when everyone saw that the Jewish people had a miraculous experience in beating the Greeks, at that moment, the world got it. The world got it. The world said, whoa, whoa, whoa. These are God's people, and don't mess with them. This is wrong. It was an inauguration in the world that became very clear to everyone. How is it possible? The rabbi and his ragtag bunch of rabbis are going to fight the superpower of the world and win? So the whole world got it, because the whole world had become Greeks. The whole world embraced the Greek Hellenistic view of the world, except for the Jews. We said, no, this is not it. This is not it. And it really isn't. I mean, and the truth is, if you want to know the deeper truth, the Greeks actually learned their wisdom from King Solomon. There are teachings that says that the Greeks used to come to learn King Solomon. King Solomon knew all the wisdoms. He knew the inner wisdom of the Torah and he knew the external wisdom, the sciences. And the Jews wanted the internal wisdom. And the nations of the world want the external wisdom. And there are reports that we have from certain texts that they came to learn by King Solomon. And that's why there's certain theories that you could see they're based in deeper Jewish thinking. But they changed it, obviously. They made their own ideas, and to the point where it really has no bearing to the Jewish view, because the Greeks had their own idea. They put human beings as the center of the world, and Aristotle felt that Aristotle, by the way, did no experiments. You know that. You know why he did no experiments? Because he said, whatever my mind can understand, that's what's true. And whatever is not logical in my mind, that's not true, which is wrong. If you read Einstein, you learn any quantum physics, it doesn't make any sense. So Aristotle and the Greeks put human beings, that's why it's called humanism. They put human beings, that's why their gods are in the form of human beings, because they said that we are the center and our mind dictates everything. And they didn't have a superior mind to understand what the Jewish mind said, which is, what does God say? Which, by the way, is why we like the menorah, because the menorah, the 7 candelabras, represent the 7 wisdoms of the world. But the wisdoms of the world are only wisdoms to understand what God is giving you. If you understand your world, great. You're going to have your ideas. It's like, if you look at every single self-help book, if you're old enough to know that the self-help books when you were 20 are considered to be rubbish today. That was stupid. Dr. Spock, he's a child abuser. What do you mean? I did all Dr. Spock stuff for my kids. That's what we were told. I don't know. But you can't do that today. It's no good. So everyone makes it their ideas. And their ideas last for, I don't know, a few years. And everyone says, that's not a great idea, because it's limited to whatever the person could conceive. So the Greeks want to make everyone Greeks, and the Jews said, no, this is not what we're doing. And when the world saw this miracle, the whole world got it. They said, this is God's people. It doesn't make any sense. Now, that's an amazing idea. It's also called Hanukkah because it inaugurated the world to the truth. Now, but there's a question on this. I mean, Abraham already started this revolution 1,000 years before. We already had the story of if you read in the book of Daniel, the miracles that happened where King Nebuchadnezzar, right, he said that this is the God of all gods. Nebuchadnezzar, when he tried to kill Daniel, his friends, he threw them into the fire and they got burnt. And afterwards, when they put Daniel into the lion's den, he got saved. So that was Koresh, that was his Darius, that was afterwards, it was a Persian king. But during times of the Babylonians, the Persians, they also saw the miracles. They were afraid to fight against the Jews because they knew the miracles God did for them. So it's very hard for me to understand, why is it that the conquering of the Greeks that inaugurated the world to understand this is God's people and don't mess with them? So I like to say the following answer, I think is makes sense. When you read the story in Daniel about Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, when he saw the miracles, he saw Daniel interpreting the dream, and when he saw the miracles of he threw Daniel's friends into the fire, they wouldn't bow down to the idol, and they got saved. When he saw these miracles, what he said was, I know he wanted to actually bring a tribute to Daniel. And Daniel said, no, don't make me a god. And he said, no, don't worry. I know your God is the God of gods. So what does that mean? It means the world was still primitive. So they saw that, yes, this is the God of the Jews. Well, this is the God of gods. But they had a primitive way of thinking. What the Greeks did was that it took a world that people were barbarians, people were backwards, and it gave the world a certain philosophical understanding. Not a correct one, but something where there was some culture. And now they saw that the people who were buying into this loftier way of thinking than they had in the past, now they saw the miracles that God was doing for them. They all got it. They all realized, all right, this is what it's about. Now, why is this so important? Because why is it important right now? Because I was talking to you about last week about what's happening in the world right now, and I don't know. I'm trying to process what you see in the news with the people in London, the people in New York, and all these people that are protesting. I'm trying to process what it is, because on one hand, what I said last week, I stand by it even more strongly now. But I do have to admit that the level of stupidity is incredibly high. It's like you need to read a book, like the occupation. Well, don't you understand? There is no occupation. They pulled out of Gaza almost 20 years ago, 18 years ago. These guys could have made Gaza into, it is a resort. So, but people don't even know. They say things. So on one level, you can say people just don't know. They're really, their ignorance is just unbelievable. It's shocking. So I could attribute it to that. I could, but I don't really want to, because I imagine there are some people that are just that stupid that, okay, but I don't really want to, because I don't think that a person who has good intentions would make such a grave mistake just because of their lack of knowledge. I believe there's something else that has to be cooking inside. And that's why I'm telling the story about the Greeks. Because the Greeks, when this happened, the world understood. The world does understand. I remember when my wife and I got married, we wanted to find a deserted beach. That's the place we can go on the beach. There'd be no one else there. We went to this place called the Seychelles Islands, and nobody had seen a Jew before. They never saw a Jew. It was incredible. Crazy stories I have there. Where they were following me. People were like literally following me all the time. You're Jewish? Wow! Tell me. It was really crazy. So anyway, so I said, well, what do you know about Jews? So they go, they never saw a Jew before, and they go, we know two things. They're smart, and they're God's chosen people. That was pretty interesting. They never saw a Jew before, and that's what they thought. It's very fascinating. I mean, I always tell, I had these crazy stories where I think I told you this, but it was just bizarre. I literally got off the airport. Those who haven't heard the story, I got off the airport, and my wife and I are walking, to our bed and breakfast. And my wife says to me, "There's this guy that's following us." And I said, "No, you're imagining it. These guys don't follow us. It's from the airport." So I said, "Okay, hang a left. The guy hangs left too." So I say, hang a right. The guy hangs a right too. I turn, I go, what do you want? He goes, are you Israelites, the chosen people? And I go, yeah. He goes, oh my God, you never met one. He starts freaking out. The guy, what he was doing was he came visiting us all the time. He came on Saturday on Shabbat, and we had to bring our own food. So we bought cans of tuna, we bought things. So he walks in, he goes, "Is this traditional Jewish food?" I go, "No, just Starkist. Take it easy, relax. You're out of control." But this guy was following, and this happened every place we went to. We went the bed and breakfast we went to. We walked in to the bed and breakfast. Guy sees me, sees that wearing a kippah, and he says to me. He says, "Are you a Jew?" I go, "Oh, God, again." So he goes, "I gotta tell you, I have been excommunicated from this island. The preacher excommunicated this guy in the bed and breakfast we're staying at." I said, "Why did he excommunicate you?" He goes, "Because I ask a lot of questions." And he said I asked too many questions and he excommunicated me. I said, in Judaism, the guy who asked the most questions is the biggest scholar. It's the best thing. And then the guy decided to ruin my honeymoon. Every 2 seconds, knocking on my door. "Rabbi, I got another question for you." Like, leave me alone. So this was our experience in the Seychelles Islands. It was quite incredible. But that's what they knew. They knew the Jews are smart and the children. That's all they knew. Okay. So the world sort of got this concept. So maybe people today, some are, yes, with the advent of Facebook, people are really, really ignorant. And I guess some people could maybe, hear, but I just do believe deep down subconsciously, that's not what's going on. Maybe a few people just really don't know, but they're not the ones screaming and yelling. They're the ones saying, I don't really understand. The ones that because that's the way it is. God set it up that way, that people would know that the Jews are a chosen people. So much so, I'll tell you a story I heard from my rabbi this week. Incredible story. They were in the early 50s. They sent this guy. I don't know who sent them. I was the government, but a guy went from America to Germany And he went there for 2 years to study the German people. Like, what are these people? How do they do this thing? And he interviewed people. For 2 years, he interviewed people, the common, guy in the street in Germany in the 50s, finding out like how do they think? What do they understand? He wrote a book. All of his interviews. He has one story there where he interviewed this guy. The guy says he asks him, what's your memories of this whole time during the Holocaust? The guy says like this: I was 8 years old, this guy says. He's much older now. I was 8 years old in the night of Kristallnacht. Kristallnacht was the night that really started the whole process when they broke all of the Jewish stores. Crystal is glass, and Nacht means night. It was a night of broken glass. That was the night where the German people went out and they smashed all of the Jewish stores that were there, and they robbed all their stuff, and they started this whole process. So the guy said, I was 8 years old in the night of Kristallnacht, this night when they destroyed all the Jewish stores. And I was 8 years old. I wanted to go out and see the action. I wanted to get out and see what was going on. So my mother locked me in the house. My mother said to me, don't you understand? There's no way you can lift your arm up against the heavens and not have to pay for it. She understood what was happening. There's no way they're going out now and they're raising their hands against heaven because what they're doing to the Jews, and there's going to be a price to pay. And she locked the kid in the house. I don't know how many people said that. I don't know. I don't know how many people in Gaza say it. I don't know. I don't know if I can count them on one hand. I have no idea. I don't know. So some people maybe see it, but everyone subconsciously knows it. And that's what happened with the Nazis on their belt buckle was that they believed it. They wrote this thing about, I don't know what it said exactly, in God, not in God we trust, but they thought they claimed they were doing this greatest thing, but they knew they were fighting against God. And that's the deepest thing here. So subconsciously, I said to you last week, subconsciously the person feels that this is somehow the Jews represent God in the world. And really, that's why it says in the writings, in the Torah, it says the war against the enemy of the Jews is the enemy of God. And that's what it bothers people. It's like, wait a minute, they represent God in the world? I got a problem. I want to do things my way. I don't want to do things the way that the Torah says to do them. I'm fighting God. And that's the deeper lying understanding of what's going on. So in Hanukkah, what happened was, it was the beginning of taking this announcement. This is the people of God, which was said before. We saw it from the time the Jews crossed the Red Sea. It said everyone shook and everyone realized. So it happened earlier, but now people. I would like to say this is the explanation of why Hanukkah was the turning point, because now the world was really a more mature place. And now they had gone away from their idolatrous processes. Abraham had already caused a revolution, and people already had ideas that were moving away from the more pagan approach, and that's what the Greeks were bringing in. And not that it was correct, but it was more of a less barbaric process. And now when they saw that this is the God, that the God of the Jews, that God protects his people, then whoever fights against them is really at that time raising their hand against God too. And that is the process of the miracles, because Hanukkah is a miracle. So I said to you many times that there's different names of God. Why we have different names of God is because we can't understand God. That's some religions want to understand God. It's an absurdity. You can't understand God. God is incomprehensible. You understand how God relates to us, the actions he does. He is compassionate. He's loving. All of the names of God is how God relates to the world. There's one name, Elohim, which is the name of God, how he runs the world. And that's why that name is the numerical value of nature, Hateva, Because if you look at nature, you could think, oh, it's nature, it happens on its own. You can see God is running that. So people get lost in nature, okay, which is why also the Hebrew word nature, teva, is the same word as litboa, to drown, because you could drown in nature. I always say, people say, oh, it's so beautiful. It's Mother Nature. But I don't know, my mother's name is not Nature, is yours? Like, what means Mother Nature? What does that mean? Oh no, it's Mother Nature. Oh, no, who's Mother Nature? Where is she? So it's absurdities. It's like, you don't want to say it. They say, I do it to say it. No, it's God running the world. But the nature is the process that God creates that happens on a consistent basis. And the miracles are the things that you see are outside. And therefore, those are revealed. You see God is running the world clearly. When you see the natural process, a spiritual person is supposed to see it is run by God. That's what makes a spiritual person. A person who sees a sunrise and says, whoa, this is beautiful. This is beautiful. Why is it like this? Well, because God created the world this way. So that's a spiritual person. But a normal person, once he sees something that's miraculous, he wakes up. So what happened was, during Hanukkah time, when they saw the miracles happening to the Jews, the world supposedly should have woken up and become mature. And that's the miracles of Hanukkah. Miracles of Hanukkah are so relevant to what's happening right now in today's day and age. I think I shared with you maybe this last year, but there's a story in the Talmud. It's relevant to people to know this, that what happened was when Adam ate from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, God said he was going to die. And he didn't know how he was going to die. And what happened was the days started getting shorter and shorter because the world began from Rosh Hashanah, which is, in Tishrei, that's September time, from October, that fall season. And now the world started getting darker and darker. So Adam thought that he was going to die because the world was going into complete darkness. He saw the days getting shorter and shorter and shorter, and he thought that was his death process. Then what happened was he prayed, he did tshuva, and what happened was he brought offerings and prayed. And then what happened was that the days started getting longer. And he realized this was the process of the world, and he made a festival for 8 days. The Talmud says Adam started doing this festival to thank God for saving him. And what happened was the early idolaters took this festival, this pagan festival, and they made it a winter solstice festival. Every pagan had this thing. That's why the Jews stopped doing that. We didn't have the holiday Adam. And the Talmud goes through, there's a Roman festival called Saturnalius, and the Talmud discusses exactly the festival. It's a Roman pagan holiday. I mean, that's why if you look at the Christian holiday that's there, they took all these different pagan customs, the tree and all these different things. That was because this was a this was a holiday that was originally set up in holiness that Adam did, and then all the pagans took this and made a winter holiday. So that was then the Jews never took that holiday because it was a pagan holiday. But the story of Hanukkah really is the fixing of that, because the story of Hanukkah happens in the darkest time. That's why it happens there. It's not how people think. It's all these holidays. No, the pagans took the winter solstice holiday. What happened was the story of Hanukkah happened really it was the 25th of the month of Kislev, which is a lunar calendar, but that year it started out was the winter solstice time, and that was the darkest time of year. And from there, the Hanukkah lights bring light in from the darkness. And that really is the dynamic of the world right now. The world is in darkness, with crazy ideas and literally fighting against God. I think they're fighting against the Jews, they're fighting against God because they have their own issues, just like that story I told you about in Germany. So what happened was that we're coming into the time of this month of Hanukkah, where it's the time of miracles that everyone needs to wake up and see. And that's the light of Hanukkah, that in the darkest time, we light the Hanukkah candles, and they miraculously lasted for 8 days. Okay, I don't get into eight. Eight is a supernatural. It's beyond the seven cycle. But that is the process of what has to happen in the world right now. The world is fighting against truth, and that's not going to work. And in Hanukkah is the time of miracles. That's even the word Kislev. The word Kislev, actually, the root of the word Kislev is from a verse in Proverbs. Ki Hashem b'kislecho. God is your trust. So we right now believe very strongly in miracles, not because, miracles because God runs the world. Why not? I don't know if you know this, but there was once a Jewish cadet in West Point who went to complain why they never study any of the wars, these wars in Israel. Like, they were studying all these different battles, never studied any of the wars in Israel. You know what they told him? They said, we can't, because they know none of them make any sense. You never should have won any of them. And that's the same thing here. I'm not listening to the news with the people who have, these insights and those insights, because that's not where it's at. Where it's at is that God runs the world. And the month of Kislev is the month already where we saw the miracles of Hanukkah in the darkness, and where we put our trust in Hashem, who runs the world, and we are not bound by the natural processes that he put in, and he can do as he wants and when he wants. And therefore, that is what is going on today in the world, literally. As it says, when the end of days, when the nations want to gather against Israel, it's crazy, literally playing out. Like it talks about in the book of Yechezkel, Ezekiel, how the people line up together that should not be together. They share no values together. You see people protesting for the Palestinians, like, these sides, queers for Palestine. It's like the funniest thing in the world. Like, if they came to Palestine, they'd throw off a roof. Like, don't you understand what you're saying? Like, this is bizarre. The bizarre alignments that are going on right now are crazy, but they all have one thing in common. They have a certain hatred for the Jews, which I'm telling you is rooted in a problem with God. And that's the deepest part. So those who love and appreciate that the Jews have to be a light unto nations, I'm sorry, not saying the Jews have been perfect, because that's the real story. The real story is for us to get ourselves together and to act in the ideal way. So, but like I said to you before, it's like the Jews that you see are not the ones that you need to see. Like, I'm speaking to you here as a rabbi, but like everyone, around here are rabbis, and and the holy greatest sages of Israel, you've never seen. I'm here as a representative, like minor leagues, minor league guy getting in just to tell you. but what happens is that, so the Jews that are running around, so maybe Nobel Peace Prize winners, or they're making, meta realities like Zuckerberg, these are not the people that we're necessarily proud of. I heard from my rabbi he said, like, unfortunately, Einstein was a failed Jew. I just say that. Yeah, okay, he's a smart guy, but like, he kind of missed the boat. He had some good ideas. He was smart, true, but that's not what it's about. And so I'm not saying that everything that the Jews have done is perfect, but the Jews, you have to understand, if you go to a place and you see the people who are serving God, people in my neighborhood, learn Torah, 15 hours a day. It's not uncommon. That's not uncommon. I'm not saying everyone was 15 hours a day, but most people learn, most people in the neighborhood here learn 8 hours a day, 8 hours a day? What are you talking about? I go 8 hours a day. It's a full-time job. Yeah. I mean, I think that's kind of average, you know? So it's like, it's a different thing. And so, yeah, the Jews, we have to do our spiritual work. And as I said before, the scary part, I mean, it's not scary because it is what it is, but the fact that people, have this type of hatred coming out is really shocking. That's not really shocking. I shouldn't say shocking. I'm not surprised at all. But I guess if some people are surprised, but the deeper part is that it's a problem they have with the truth and with Hashem. That's why it's a mind-boggling thing. The war of Gog and Magog, the war at the end of time, happens after the Mashiach reveals himself. That means that people are still holding on. The Germans, I heard this guy. It was interesting. I don't know if you ever heard this guy. I've heard him speak. His name is Douglas Murray. Interesting British author. The guy had a straight mind. He was like, and he said something that was incredible. He was talking about the situation. He was talking, people were asking him, and he was like, "What are you talking about? These people are, like." He said, he said when the Nazis, that they had to all get drunk at night because subconsciously a lot of them knew they were doing the most barbaric, cruel, insane, horrific things. He said, what he's a journalist, he's an author, he's on the board there. He says the people that are doing this heinous crimes from Hamas are proud. They revel in it. And so one of the guys, guy Piers Morgan, he asked him, he said, "Oh, how can you fight there if the people are there's innocent civilians?" The guy said, I don't know what's called innocent civilians. He said, I saw it happen. They were all cheering. They voted for Hamas. They were all cheering. He says when the British bombed, Dresden, and when they fought in Germany, they said the German people chose this. The German people allowed this. Were there some good Germans? I'm sure there were. The good news is God runs the world. And if somebody is a good person in a bad place, okay, God will protect him. He will go, and he will be amongst the righteous of the nations. My father, my mother, I told you, was in Auschwitz, was in the camps. My father was in hiding the whole time. My father was hiding. He was in hiding from the Nazis the whole time. And there was a family that was helping to hide him, a non-Jewish family. My father got to America. When he started to make money, he went and he supported these people. He funded them. He bought them a car, and he took care of them, and he paid them back for their kindness. And surely Hashem pays them back, even more so. So if a person's a good person stuck in a bad situation, okay, it's unfortunate. But the people who are embracing this type of thing, they're the same as people doing it. They're part of it. And so there are those that are fighting against, you feel fighting against God. And then there are those that are looking and saying, I'm seeing through this, and this is very, very dark. And those, thank God, will be on the right side of history for themselves. And for where the world's going, it's going to be fine. It's going to be good. We're going to see miracles here. And that's the system of the world. And it's nothing. It's nothing new. Nothing new. This is the same old thing. But in the end, you can't fight against God, and His people will do what it says in the prophets and be a light unto nations. And those amongst the nations that will be part of that will enjoy that light that'll come out from Jerusalem. Okay, questions, comments, ideas?
Rabbi?
Yes.
Shalom, Rabbi. I'm Jacob from South Korea.
Yeah, I know. I recognize you.
Good to see you again.
Good to see you too.
Yeah, but yeah. I want to ask a question about Netrei Karta.
Yeah.
And they are do you think they are completely wrong?
Okay, so
Uh,
let
because
me,
they are against the Israel, I think.
right.
Yeah.
So for those who don't know, let me explain what Neturei Karta is a little bit. And even maybe more so than Neturei Karta is the Satmar Hasidim, who share a similar idea, but they're much more discreet about it. So there is a discussion if the Jews in the Talmud, it says the Jews, God wanted the Jews to not return to Israel by force. Now, in the same Talmudic discussion, it talks about the nations of the world, God made them promise not to overly persecute the Jews, whatever this Talmud means. So the Neturei Karta and the Satmar maintain that the Jews should never set up a state of Israel. They maintain that the Jews coming back in 47 was by creating a state. They shouldn't have done that. They should have waited until God provided the state. Now, are they right or wrong? So most of the Jewish world maintains they're wrong, and there's a few basic reasons. One reason is the fact that the Holocaust happened. The non-Jews broke their part of the deal where they overly persecuted the Jews. So if there was some discussion that God had, whatever this Talmudic discussion is about this arrangement, they can't persecute and the Jews shouldn't come back by force to Israel, they broke the deal. That's one explanation. The explanation is that the UN voted to create a state, right? The partition plan was a nations of the world agreement. So it's not called the Jews did it by force. So most people maintain that the Satmar are incorrect about setting up a state. Now, however, I don't know. The Satmar. I'm not going to Neturei Karta. I'll explain Neturei Karta in a second. The Satmar may have been correct because I don't know. The reality is that the state of Israel itself, a lot of great things have come out, but the state of Israel is not a religious state. And even though it's becoming religious, but the government's the government, and it runs according to its own rules. As a matter of fact, I mean, what the government's doing, with how they're fighting the war, I think is not correct in Jewish law. And not the way people say, not correct the way they say that. They say, oh, they're killing innocent people. No, they're actually endangering their own citizens. Because by them doing this, by them going door to door and trying to find terrorists, that allows them to keep bombing us. So no nation would do that. So the government functions as the government functions. So, and the reality is that we don't know. If you go back to the point in 1947 where there was a big argument amongst the rabbis if there should be a state, not should be a state. What was the option? There were some rabbis that were trying to get Jordan to create some situation where the Jews could live in Israel. Again, Jews always lived in Israel, just to get rid of the misunderstandings. Jews always lived in Israel, but they were coming back in more in mass, more in from the 1800s. But there was always Jews here. So I don't think the Satmar are correct. I think they're wrong. But even if they were right, it wouldn't make a difference because their argument is not about coming to Israel. Their argument is you set up a political state before the Messiah comes. That's their position. Now, the Neturei Karta, I don't know them well enough, but I just think that it's a mistake what they do, but they have this position that they can believe what they believe. But the reality is that you need to be discreet about it because people quote them and it's negative for the Jewish people to have any Jew standing up and saying things that seem to embrace the enemies of the Jews. I think that's a mistake that they're doing for whatever reason. The Neturei Karta are saying things that against Israel when it emboldens the enemies of Israel. That shouldn't be done, and maybe they're not doing that. I don't know, but I don't follow what they do too much. So the bottom line is like this: most people maintain that it was the right thing to set up a state when we did. The Satmar and the Charikarta believe it's not a set of a political state, which I don't have a big problem with, because it doesn't mean Jews don't live in Israel, means but the state of Israel right now, the government is a political government that does not function according to Jewish law. So the state of Israel, now, do they act morally? Well, the answer is that if you don't follow the Torah, you don't really act morally because you have your own ideas. Do they act more morally than other nations according to their system? For sure. In a crazy way, like I said, no other nation would function the way they're doing. Every other nation, America would just flatten them. If any other nation had the capability, they would do that. So they act, but that's not necessarily the Jewish way. We don't believe in turn the other cheek. That's not correct. We don't. That's not our religion. We think that's wrong. Now, to understand this, the point about how to respond really is a question that it's not just a question of, and people are saying this, and it's very wrong. Even some smart people that I think politically in America are intelligent people. Someone like this guy, Vivek Ramaswamy, a lot of the things he said are intelligent, but he has this one totally off. This is not about a local attack and it's taking revenge. That's not at all. What it is that there is a terrorist group that says our goal is to kill every Jew. From the river to the sea means kill every Jew. That's what it means. The river to sea means the whole Israel. Where do you put the rest of them? Kill all the Jews. So they say that, they do that. They say they'll continue to do that. That's a different thing than saying, they did a bad thing, we're taking revenge. No, you have a terrorist group who is hell bent on destroying you. You must defend yourself. So the answer to your question is that I don't think the Satmar is right. And I certainly don't think the Charikarta is right. Most Jews do not think that. But even if they do, we get along very nicely with Satmar, friends of the Satmar, not a problem. But they're only arguing about, should there be a establishment of a political state when that political state is not a religious state, which it is not until Mashiach comes, and it's not. Now, it's moving towards, there are more religious people. And you should know that really was the whole discussion. That was really the issue. That was the break the Jews had within the system that was happening with this whole Supreme Court thing. That's what it was about. What happened was that the left wing in Israel started getting nervous that it's becoming a religious state, which it is. It is a religious state. It is becoming a religious place. Now, don't get nervous. I mean, what are they nervous about? They're crazy. That's silly. It's not that the Jews are going to go and force them, and we have a Torah with the wisdom of application. Do you know that it says that the High Court of Israel in the Sanhedrin, before the temple was destroyed, 40 years before it was destroyed, they already stopped trying capital cases, because to kill someone when the society has fallen to a certain low level was not the right thing. So if the religious are worried, the Niles are worried how the religious are going to force them and do this and that. They're not. We're not going to force anyone. When the Mashiach comes, you'll want to do it, though. Everyone's going to want to do it. And what's happened right now is, thank God, there has been tremendous unity. The Satmar, these people who are against the state of Israel, they have gone to visit and comfort the mourners of people that have died from the terror attack. And they have been with these people, and these people for the first time, because the people that were killed in terror attack were generally very, very left-wing people. For their first exposure to religious people has been happening now. And they're like, whoa, these are the people? These people that care about us and call us their brothers? So, I believe they have a mistake, but again, their mistake does not really affect much, because no religious person maintains that the government of Israel is the right government. The question that the argument is do you deal with this government and try to make the best of it, or do you not deal with it? The Satmar don't deal with the government. They don't do anything in the government. They're totally have their own things. They don't take money from the government. They don't vote. They don't do anything. They're separated from it. So that's the argument there. I don't think they're right, but even if they are right, it doesn't change anything. It's just that some people should have to be careful about strengthening the hands of the enemies of Israel because they have a certain view, which may or may not be correct. That to be careful about.
Thank you
That make
so much,
sense?
Rabbi.
You're welcome. Okay. Any other questions, ideas, comments?
Real quick, Rabbi, you mentioned the interesting point about Adam HaRishon instituting a festival of dedication for 8 days, and you mentioned that was in the Talmud. Where is that? So I can look at that.
It's in the Talmud called Avodah Zarah.
Okay,
Book called it's the Talmud tractate on idolatry.
gotcha. Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, it goes through idolatry, so it talks about the practice of idolaters, because we have to know how to deal with that. But yeah. Okay. Any other thoughts, comments, ideas?
Lara, you had your hand up. Do you still have a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment. When Rabbi mentioned how the Palestinians celebrate after after killing any of the Jews, there used to be a video on social media of a Palestinian woman. I can't remember her name, but she was one of the known people because she had about 2.7 million followers. And in one of her Instagram shares, she said specifically, we give birth to our children to kill Jews. When we have a son, we raise our son up and we say, he's going to kill Jews in the future, and we're very proud of it. And she said that in such arrogant manner that I am like, how do people even hit like on this? And
yeah, it's amazing.
I have seen so many videos whenever a Jewish person got kidnapped or killed, no matter who it is, even if someone's just standing at the bus stop and they kill him, they go around and they give candies to the people and they make a big feast. So these people are really, truly bloodthirsty animals. That's what they are. They're subhumans, they're bloodthirsty humans. So when someone says to me, I feel sorry for the innocent people, in the back of my mind, it goes, oh, so if you have a cancer and the doctor is about to remove that cancer, you say, just remove the ones in the front. The ones in the back, there's still so little, you know?
Yeah.
They're innocent. That's how it interprets in my mind, because I'm from Turkey and I know how a lot of Muslim people are, and their hatred is real. Whether it's a 5-year-old, whether it's 10-year-old, whether it's 100-year-old, it's just, this is the way they are.
Yeah, it is it's really quite incredible that they really have brainwashed an entire generation. And they brainwash themselves, and they don't even know. I mean, it's bizarre because, like I said, you know, the whole stupid people around the country screaming, yeah, they have a right to occupation. Insane, because they got billions of dollars. Their heads of the Hamas are billionaires. They stole from their people. They've trained their people. They created a hellhole when they could have really created a beautiful place, but that's not where their head is. Their head is into complete destruction. And by the way, and there are some, you know, Muslims that are like, know this about the Palestinians. Again, the Palestinians is a funny name because there is no Palestinians. It's not, there was no nation called Palestine. That was made up. It was a term made up by Yasser Arafat in the 60s. These are a mixed breed of the people that were passing through the land. You know, so right now, yes, it's unfortunate, and that's why you're right, Lara. I don't know. As I said, there's two different parts to this. One is that war unfortunately, innocent people do die sometimes, and you can try not to kill, which they try not to kill civilians. That's one, but people will die. But two, I don't know really who is the innocent civilian. I really don't know. It's very hard to. I'm sure there are a couple. How many? I don't know. The guy the guy from Hamas. You ever hear the son of the head of Hamas who? So he got it, and some other people have it. You hear some of the people saying, realize it's Hamas that put him, but how many? And what happens when you brainwash the kid and you raise the kid on hatred? You have these people like, who is it? Was it the Gabriella? What's her name? Gabriella. I got her name. Gabriella something. She grew up in what's her name?
Brigitte Gabrielle.
Yeah. What's the first name again?
Brigitte.
Gabrielle? Right. She grew up in like in Syria or Lebanon, and she was told to hate the Jews, and then she grew, and then a doctor saved her life or something in California, and she started realizing that I have been brainwashed. So there are some people that don't know, but like I said, I think on the whole, those who want to know, those who have a good heart, will see what's real, and sometimes it's a hard process. Like this son of the Hamas guy, his story is incredible. He didn't even want to. He was trying to be a double agent for Hamas, and they didn't believe him. They kept torturing him, and then he realized, wait a minute, these people are out of. They're just terrorists, just killers. So he saw through it. Some do, but you're right, Lara. It's a very, and that's why the whole thing is ridiculous. It's so ridiculous to go and to say, "Oh, innocent." I don't know. Well, listen, I mean, again, either way, people do die when there's a war, especially when they put they put their whole thing as human shields. They use them, and then they are trained for that. They are raising their kids in this way. It's a culture of hate. It's a culture of hate, and without any facts or anything, it's ridiculous. It's so bizarre, really bizarre. Arab Israelis, I told you, in Israel they have more rights than Jews, in my opinion, by the Israeli government. Because what happens, the government gives them a free hand, and then they don't charge them. They don't give them. They don't have so many rules. Israel's got a lot of regulations. Like in America, was always the question of how much regulations. And that's, Trump got rid of a lot of regulations. And so in Israel, you can't just go build what you want to build. It's a lot of regulations. The Arabs don't have it. So the Israeli Arabs have, in my opinion, more freedom than the Jews living here. And the other ones who don't have it are the ones who live under Arab control, like the people who live in Gaza. They live under the Hamas control, and these guys are terrorists. They're killers. But the good news is, what's the good news? God runs the world. That's the good news. That's the good news, and they're not gonna. No one's gonna do anything that's out of God's plan, and it's all gonna be brought to where it has to be, and you just gotta do the right thing. That's what it's about. Okay, everybody, I'm signing off. We'll see you, God willing, next week.
Thank you so much,
care.
Rabbi.
Bye-bye.
Thank
Blessings.
you. Thank you. Bye bye.